Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Ashrafil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man ihtadahum bihadihi wa iqtada bisunnatihi ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. My dear respected honorable listeners, I greet you with the greetings of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we will continue with Surah Ikhlas today. And inshallah, Mawlana Asif will take you through the Tafsir. And inshallah, tomorrow we will also go through Surah Al-Ikhlas. And tomorrow we have a special guest joining us, inshallah. We will begin with the Tajweed session. Yesterday I went through verse by verse the common mistakes of Surah Al-Ikhlas. Today, inshallah, we'll just do mashq. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد صدق الله العظيم.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah, we're on the second part of Surah Ikhlas, and yesterday Ustad Shu'aib, he went through Surah Ikhlas, and he mentioned as well that Surah Ikhlas, the tafsir of it, I've checked a simple tafsir actually, Safat al-Tafasir, which is known to be a sort of brief tafsir. Even then, there's still a lot to go through. It just shows how, despite being a small surah, it has a lot of meaning. You can derive a lot of lessons from it. Inshallah, I hope to go through, you can say, a different aspect maybe as well, inshallah. So I'll go through each ayah, and if you have any questions throughout, then please do ask. There might be some questions that you might want to raise. But I want to save that for tomorrow, inshallah, as we have a guest speaker tomorrow. So I would want Mufti Sufyan, inshallah, who will be joining us tomorrow, to go through the tafsir of Surah Ikhlas a bit more extensively, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwa Allahu ahad. Qul, say, huwa Allah, he is Allah, ahad, who is, or you can say, he is Allah, one, the one. And as Ustaz Shu'aib mentioned yesterday as well, a few points I just want to quickly mention and just repeat a few things as well. That the reason of revelation, or an incident that had happened, Ikrimah radiallahu an, he said that when the Jews, when they made their claim that they worship Uzair, that, for example, in the Quran it's mentioned وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ عُزَيْرٌ ibn Allah, that they said, that Uzair was the son of Allah. And the Christians, as we know, they claim that they worship, in fact, Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, and they say they worship the Messiah, the Son of Allah. And at that time as well, I'm not sure if they are still around, but the Zoroastrians, they worship, and they say they worship the sun and the moon. And obviously the mushrikun, the idolaters, they say that we worship the idols. So this is to reject all these claims, and I've just been told that the Zoroastrians, they're still around actually. They worship the fire, or they it's not really clear what they exactly worship. There's some people say that they believe in Allah, or a god, and they believe that that fire or light is a representation of God, you can say. So they do worship, they do prostrate to the to fire. But yeah, so this is to reject all these claims, and this is to really lay down the foundation of the deen. The main fundamental of this deen is Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As also mentioned in the tafsir as well, that the word ahad, which is used, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, the word wahid isn't used. So an ahad is to, you can say, to emphasize. It's there to emphasize oneness. So for example, wahid, when we count wahid, ithnan, the number 2 comes after it, whereas ahad, this is according to one tafsir, that this is why ahad has been used, is to emphasize the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can say he is the only one, but there's other claims as well, there's other arguments for that as well, but this is just from one tafsir, that the reason why ahad has been used to emphasize. And some linguists, they say that ahad, which is you can say af'alu tafdil. So this is a word which is to emphasize. For example, you have akbar, which means more great, or the most great, or you have, for example, when we say arhamur rahimin, he's the most merciful. It's just to compare. So the word ahad, it falls on that scale as well. It's just to emphasize the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in another tafsir, it's saying as well, just to emphasize that he has no peer, no assistance, no rival. There's nobody equal to him. There's nobody comparable to him. And as we progress through the surah, we will understand that as well. So the word ahad cannot be used for anyone in affirmation except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot ascribe this to anybody else. And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is perfect in all of his attributes and actions. So now when we go to the next part of the next ayah, Allahu Samad, and it's reported that Ikrimah, he said that Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, this means the one who all of the creation depends upon, their needs and their requests. So just earlier on as well, I had a question myself that I posed to Ustad Shuaib. That was the difference between As-Samad and Al-Ghani. So because we use English translations a lot of the times, and they're just translations, a lot of the meaning, you can say, is lost in translations. Sometimes we don't get the exact translation. A lot of the times people translate it the same way. There are differences though. Al-Ghani means independent, and sometimes people it's often interpreted as Samad as independent as well. But when I did a bit of research as well, I checked a few Arabic dictionaries as well. There wasn't a clear meaning, but you can say there's no exact meaning for this. But I've gone for the meaning I would say the most befitting is, you can say as-Samad means the eternal refuge. I mean, it can also mean independent as well, but it's more to do with, as for example, Al-Ghani, he is not in need of us. He's he isn't in need of us. He doesn't need anything. Al-Ghani, Allah is independent. But As-Samad means that everything else is dependent on him, depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you can say the opposite. So I'll say that again. Al-Ghani means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is independent. He doesn't need anybody. He doesn't need any other being. But As-Samad means that everything depends on him, you can say. So it's also reported that Ali radiallahu anh, sorry, no, not Ali, Ali bin Abi Talha, from Ibn Abbas also radiallahu anhuma, he is the master who is perfect in his sovereignty. So it also explains that as well. That he's the most noble and he is perfect in his nobility. So it can also mean that, like I said, there's a few meanings to this. So it can mean that he is perfect in every way. So Allah is the most noble, for example, but he is perfect in his nobility as well. So meaning that there's no, as we said before, there's nothing that can compare with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's the most magnificent, and he's perfect in his magnificence. He's the most forbearing and he is the most perfect in his forbearance, and Allah is all knowing and he is the most perfect, and he's perfect in his knowledge. He's the most wise and he is perfect in his wisdom. So every attribute there is to Allah, he is the most perfect in every attribute there is. So inshallah, so moving on. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. So he begets not, he is neither, and he is neither begotten. So nothing, you can say, better meaning is that, in simple terms, that he does not have any children, or he does not have any parents or spouse. Because if Allah was to have a child, if Allah was to have a parent, it means that he is dependent on something, that he is in need of something. And we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free, as we mentioned before, as-samad, as we mentioned as well, al-ghani, Allah is independent. So this was to reject all these claims. For example, when the Jews, when they said that Uzair was the son of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also Isa alayhi salam was the son. So this is just to reject everything. And the mushrikun, the idolaters, as they used to worship these idols, and they weren't letting go of their religion. So this was there to reject all these claims. And when the mushrikun, the idolaters came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they said, "What, describe to us your Rabb." And they asked, "Is he made from gold? Is he made from silver? Is he made out of rubies or pearls?" Just how they decorate their idols, and how they make their idols. They had idols made out of gold and silver. So they said, "Oh, what is your God? What is he made out of? What does he have?" So this is another opinion. Another narration mentions that this is why the surah was revealed. لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. So ولم يكن له, so to him, ولم يكن له كفوا أحد, كفوا equal, أحد no. So to paraphrase again, there's none comparable to him, or there's no one who is equal to him, right? ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. And as Ustaz Shu'aib mentioned yesterday, that ليس كمثله شيء, there's nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nobody like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes there can be a misconception or a misinterpretation. For example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the Quran, Sami'un Basir, that he is all hearing, all seeing, but yet we believe that Allah doesn't have any ears or eyes, or we cannot imagine anything like this. Or even the hadith mentions, for example, Yadullahi ala al-jama'ah, that the hand of Allah is with the group, with the jama'ah. So there's one interpretation, you can say that Yadullah actually means that Allah's hand, but this hand we don't know. We don't know the kayfiyah, we don't know the how of it, we don't know how this hand is. But there's another interpretation as well, which is more safe. You can say that Yadullah can also, which can mean the help of Allah, because with the hand, Yadullah, for example, with your hands you help people. So this is they've interpreted as the help of Allah is with the jama'ah. So as mentioned just before that, laysa kamithli shay, there's nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we say, for example, like we just said, Yadullahi ala al-jama'ah, wallahu sami'un basir, Allah is all hearing, all knowing. We believe Allah sees everything, we believe Allah hears everything, but we also believe that whatever we imagine, we cannot imagine, we cannot comprehend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his imagination. He is beyond limits. He's not fixed to any time or place or anything like that. So we should always bear this in mind. Laysa kamithlihi shay. And it's important to remember as well that when we sometimes think about the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to be careful as well. As mentioned yesterday, that لا تفكروا في الله ولكن فكر في آيات الله. Don't think about the existence of Allah, don't ponder about it. Rather, ولكن فكر في آيات الله, rather ponder or think about the signs of Allah, the miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we think about the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes we might overthink things. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do this? Why is there so much evil in the world, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He's the most merciful? So these things will come into our heads and into our minds, and it will test our iman. And this is a question that is posed it's quite prevalent as well, especially we live in this this era of secularism, or where people are questioning Allah. And well, this happened throughout time, but especially now we live in a time where we don't want to submit into a ideology or a concept. We feel like it's belittling ourselves, our intellect, to submit into a belief, you can say. So a lot of the times, these so-called philosophers, or people who reject the existence of God, a lot of the times because they believe, they claim, or people claim them to be intelligent or anything. So when they think to themselves that, how can I believe in such a concept, that that there's a being out there, there's so much evil going on. So they'll pose these questions. We always should remember that these questions will always be there, and sometimes we'll never have an answer to these questions. But we always have to remember that, don't ponder too much about the existence of Allah. Rather think about the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about many signs of in the Quran. Many times it's mentioned fi ayat, inna fi dhalika al-ayati li liqawmin yatafakkarun. And indeed there's a sign for those who ponder. Talks about many signs in the Quran rather than existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah reminds us of His signs rather than His existence. And this is something that we should always remember, that when we have this question about the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just look around us. Just look. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Qul siru fil ard." Travel the world, go see the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just look at the mountains, how vast and how big they are, and how fixed they are into the world. And just look at the sea, how vast it is as well. Look at the sky, how perfect it is. There's not a crack in the sky. Always just ponder about these kind of things. Sometimes because we live in the city area and the busy lifestyle, and we see concrete, we see man-made things, so we see a lot of material. So we're not often reminded about the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because why? We see human intervention, you can say. So we don't really see nature. But we always have to remember that nature actually reminds us of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we mentioned in previous sessions, that sometimes we ourselves, why is it that we like to go to the park, for example? Why is it that we like to go to certain places where there's natural scenery? It's because our soul, it feels it, and it remembers Jannah, and it wants to, and it remembers the gardens, and it remembers the rivers that flow in Jannah. And this is also just to show us that our souls, it misses Jannah as well. So when we go to places like the park and we just see simple greenery, it reminds of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we find this solace, we find this tranquility, and it's just there to remind us. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Qursiru fil ard," go see the world, and ponder, just think about the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and inshallah this will bring us back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is where I finished the translation and a brief tafsir of Surah Ikhlas. I just want to quickly mention as well that, remember, this surah is known as Surah Ikhlas, most famously known for this title, Surah Al-Ikhlas, and there's no word which is mentioned here, Ikhlas, in the surah. And we know from the previous surahs and other surahs that the title given is because there's mention of it in the surah. For example, in the surahs that we come across, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil, mention of the fil, or the army of the elephant. And so the surah was known as Surah Al-Fil, Surah Quraysh, Ila fi Quraysh. But you see in Surah Ikhlas, there's no mention of Ikhlas. So, and it's important to remember, why is it called Ikhlas? And we always remember that Ikhlas means sincerity. So when we think of Ikhlas, we always think about something that, an action that we do. And we often say, have Ikhlas in what we do. Be sincere in our actions, in our good deeds. So what does it mean by having Ikhlas in our good deeds? And we've actually touched upon this in our previous sessions as well. That it means that you do everything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Ikhlas or Khalasa or Akhlasa means that, pure from everything else, separated from everything else, just by itself. So this means that our aim, our main maqsad, our main goal in life should be the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing else should be around that. Nothing else should be there. So just to explain a bit more, inshallah, I'm going to remind you of an ayah that I mentioned in the previous sessions, and which explains Ikhlas. وَإِنَّ لَكُمْ فِي الْأَنْعَامِ لَعِبْرَةً, that indeed in the cattle there is a lesson. وَإِنَّ لَكُمْ فِي الْأَنْعَامِ لَعِبْرَةً نُسْقِيكُم مِّمَّا فِي بُطُونِهِ, that we give you drink from its stomach, مِن بَيْنِ فَرْثٍ, in between the dung, مِن بَيْنِ فَرْثٍ وَدَمٍ, and in between blood. What comes from there? لَبَنًا خَالِصًا, pure milk. Pure labanan khalisan. So remember this word khalisan, khalasa, so it's same as ikhlas. So pure milk, only milk comes from there. Labanan khalisan sa'igan lisharibin, and is palatable, it is desirable, it is delicious for the one who is drinking. So let's take this ayah into consideration, that if you look at the cattle, if you look at the cow, where milk comes from, so in between the dung and in between blood, pure milk comes from it. And we realize from this milk, and in this milk, there's no bit of dung in it. We don't see, when we drink milk, when we extract this milk, we don't see anything else. We only see pure white milk. We don't see any bit of dung in it. We don't see any dam. We don't see any blood. So Allah is describing Ikhlas to be like that. So when we are sincere in our actions, for example, and a common example is, if a brother, he wants to start practicing, the month of Ramadan has come, and he wants to start practicing, he wants to learn about the deen a bit more, and it might be apparent, maybe even the way he might dress, or maybe he might even grow a beard, and so certain things are apparent. He wants to adhere to the sunnah a bit more. He's praying his salah. He's not engaging in futile talk. So people notice this, and then they might say to him that what's wrong with you? How come you're going on a religious vibe, for example. So you can say that. So the Mufassirun, they mention that when as we mentioned, the milk, when it's extracted and it comes between the dung, this is the hardship that you have. So this is the problems that you will have to go through, the abuse that you will have to go through when you are sincere in something. So for example, this brother, he wants to practice, he wants to pray more salah. People might say to him that, oh, why are you being all religious? It's not going to last for long. So he has to deal with all that abuse. Or for example, a sister who wants to maybe observe hijab, and people are telling her, what's made you so religious? They might say, oh, you're doing it for show or something. So these are the abuse that people might have to get. What's the other thing? So milk is in between dung, and now it's in between blood as well. So the blood represents the hard work that you have to go through. You've been abused, whether it's verbal abuse. So now you have to work hard, you have to be resilient, you have to be patient. So this is the hard work. You know, when people say blood and sweat, it's because you work hard. So so in between all that, between all the abuse, between, you know, all the hard work, because you have to be resilient, you can't give up. What comes up? Lebanon khalisan, pure milk, which represents the ikhlas, which is sincerity, which is sincerity, which is ikhlas. Sa'ighal lisharibin, and it is when you're sincere in something, when you've reached that goal. For example, you've practiced your religion, you pray salah now, and you pray with devotion. When a when a person, you know, when he wants to um, start practicing the deen for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's sincere, what does he get in return? He gets Jannah, he attains the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and with the pleasure of Allah he gets Jannah. Sa'ighal lisharibin, and it is palatable for the one who drinks it. And just the way he is sincere, just the way he gained ikhlas in his action, you know, he will gain that reward as well, which will, when he reaches Jannah, he will then taste, you know, the beauty. He will taste all, you know, his hard work, all the hard work that he put in, he will taste it in Jannah. So this is what it means by being sincere. And this is why it's called Surah Al-Ikhlas. Know that it's talking about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Qul huwallahu ahad. Say that Allah is one. So when you recognize and you realize the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Think about oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you do an action, when you do a good deed, right? Maybe your parents have said, pray salah. When you do it just for, yes, we should listen to we should listen to our parents, but know that we don't do it for our parents. We do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we give in charity, for example, and it's the month of Ramadan, and we, you know, many people, they give charity, and it might have to be where we might have to give in public, right? So sometimes shaitan, or sometimes we might have whispers, or we might have some kind of, you know, feel in our heart that, um, I'm gonna give this money, and I'm gonna get fame from people. People are gonna respect me. So sometimes these things can happen. Yeah, but when you know the oneness of Allah, when you know that you need to be sincere, you only focus on the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's it. You don't care about who's gonna hear about your name, or who's going to respect you for your donation. So this is what it means when this surah talks about tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And ikhlas is all about tawheed. It's all about recognize the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you do a good deed, when you do ibadah, you only do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you give in charity, right, you don't care about anybody else. So this is why it's encouraged to give charity in secrecy, so that nobody knows about it. Only you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. But it's also encouraged as well to give in public, as also to encourage others. And one of the advice I've been given as well, it's a good piece of advice about when we do an action in public, then follow it up with an action in privacy, in secrecy, because you don't know how sincere the action was. So, but when you do it in secrecy, when nobody knows about it, when nobody knows about this deed, it's only between you and Allah. This is real sincerity, and you will taste, the sweetness of iman like this. So we don't have too long left. We have approximately just over 8 minutes. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask, inshallah. Does anybody get any questions?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, mashallah, really good talk. Enjoyed it. I just want to add something that
Okay, that's fine.
when you was talking about going out to nature and finding the beauty of Allah's creation and his just remembering him through his creation, just reminded me of a book. I've not completely finished it, but I've read most of it, and it's a really beautiful book. It's called Art of Islam by someone called Titus Burkhart. If anyone wants to read that, it really ties in. It's a really beautiful book. It talks about how art developed in the Islamic world, and It just sort of reminds you of how Allah works in mysterious ways, even through art as well. Yeah.
SubhanAllah. And to be honest, actually, this I never ever put this into perspective, but how nature really can contribute towards reminding us about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, you come across so many ayat, but I didn't really actually ponder about this until actually Ustad Shuaib actually mentioned in one of his talks actually that our ruh is from Jannah. It's from the skies. So, and then I remembered as well, that the description of Jannah is what Jannah tajri min tahtiha al-anhar, that it's gardens wherein rivers flow. So our ruh, it remembers that as well. So even if you think about even in the most you can say for example New York City, such a busy city, and it's just they call it what the concrete jungle. But even notice that even in these apartments or wherever it is, you'll see pictures of nature. People keep plants in their house. It's just so that it gives them some kind of solace. And that's because our ruh, it remembers Jannah, remembers the descriptions of Jannah. So sometimes we might need to do that. And definitely for me, it helps when we go out, when you go for walks in especially with natural scenery. Then it does remind you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I would encourage other brothers and sisters to do so as well, inshallah. We only have about 5 minutes left. If anybody else wants to ask anything, or maybe you want to add anything, inshallah. In the meantime, please do share these tafsir sessions. They're only about half an hour, 35 minutes. We hope that we don't want to take too much of your time, and we hope that you benefit as well, inshallah. So we would like other people to benefit as well. And this is a reminder for us as well. First, it's a reminder for myself, because especially when we go through the ayat, then it reminds us as well, reminds myself about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to say to us, inshallah. So please do spread the message, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خيرا for joining, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.